thought about it's a unique sound, but it's one of those unique sounds that in the early part of the 21st century that also reminds one of many, many other things, if you like. So many people can come to it and they can bring their own light on what it reminds them of. In I guess, sometimes a positive way, sometimes a negative way. But there's so many reference points are thrown at you, whether it's Cat Power, Mazzy Star, or the Slits, or whatever. But I just wondered, in terms of your own imaginations when you come to make the music, was there something you were going for? And as is often the case with great pop groups, you get it wrong, but out of that you create your own sound.
You can make those comparisons, but it never felt like it was.
What were yours?
It was. I thought it was pretty proggy. So I first thought Yes, and then I found out that Emily used to listen to Yes a lot when.
That's very interesting, because in terms of the credible references that are made, they're always in a very narrow blogosphere reference point, if you like. Bands like that wouldn't get mentioned, would they? So it's kind of, because that's probably makes sense of the length of the songs as well, which sort of busts through what the expected length of these.
And there's so many different faces to every song as well, which I thought was really interesting. I love that element of music where it's the perfect blend of emotion and cerebral, and I think that classification or whatever usually comes from external forces, which isn't a bad thing at all. I do the same thing when I hear a band and someone says, oh, what would this go well with, or how will it fit into my record collection? Everyone has a different function for music. Some people really enjoy, chronicling the lineage or the influence of something, of a great deal of bands or one particular moment in history. So there's like a joy in that. It's historical or something. So people really like to reference different bands because it makes sense to them. Oh, I really like this mood about bands like Cocteau Twins or Massive Attack or something like that. I also like this kind of mood, which is a little more aggressive, which is like Caius or something like that. So people really, it's like catering to your mood. So people will say, oh, this is something that's different, that's coming to your consciousness that you can classify in this mood, which is really nice. You have a control over it,
I think, like, in most cases, people feel very comfortable in any situation being able to identify with something. So it's like, if it's unknown, that's scary. It's scary to every human. So it's like, oh, you know what? Well, it sounds like it's like a natural thing. You can't really help it. So you're like, oh, it sounds like this. I do it too. I'm like, oh, it sounds like this. Sounds like I want to know that I know what that sounds like, and that's like a
and if it's coming
soothing
from a similar place as well.
Yeah, even though I wouldn't go, oh, they're trying. It's not coming from a negative place, like they're trying to be that. But in my head, if I can identify it with something, that makes me feel comfortable. Like it validates my existence somehow.
That's interesting. Why there's a lot of groups at the moment, their music is very hesitant. It's almost breaking down. It's depleted to an extent. And there's also all these ghostly references, sometimes literally with you, of pop history. And I wonder what it's like being young, moving into pop music now that's so loaded with reference points and memories and scenes and genres and a narrative that's now 50, 60 years old. It's almost like you're withdrawing from it, yet acknowledging this history. And I find that quite interesting, that tantalizing sense of something almost that you're nostalgic for, but you're nostalgic for something that you weren't around when it happened.
Yeah,
I wonder if that plays into the music as well.
I think that kind of happens with anyone at any point. It's just so accelerated at right now because there's such a bulk of experience at this point that you can delve into at your leisure. There's so many bands that even if one band has never heard of, say, Kraftwerk, they could sound exactly like Kraftwerk, So in that way, it's difficult. It's definitely more difficult to do something unique, but there's also this charm of everybody can make music now. So someone who is really pure and innocent, who is not just on this train of mainstream music and gets signed to a record label and whatever and gets pushed into another classification or something. So everything is just kind of fragmented. It's definitely now there's more of an opportunity for someone to ignore whatever happened previous to their making music. So I think it's double-sided.
Is there also an element at the age you are where you're actually influenced by the music that your parents played? which in a way is a new
yeah,
thing. You know,
for
once
sure.
bands started and they wouldn't be
Absolutely.
influenced by their parents' music, where now that surely
Yeah.
is the key thing you
Yeah.
were brought up with.
Yeah, I think it's more now because we can really enjoy our parents' music as well. Coming into your 20s or your 30s or whatever, that you start to relate to that. Like you love Hall & Oates and stuff like that, and I love Steely Dan. Those things were so dorky to me when I was first growing up, but now acknowledging that, just I don't know. It seems there's so much that your past can offer you, you know, and there's a nostalgia to it that gets more potent as you get older as well. You know, oh, I remember that when I was 4 years old, my parents used to play that record or something, and then it always slips in some way to the way that you make music or the things that you relate to in music.
Even if you don't think it in that moment, you're just like,
No.
well, I can't actually help it because my musical library, you know, is quite large, and it goes back to when I was 2 years old, and so you're 22, or I'm 22 years old and making up a bass line, and that could be influenced or inspired by something I was listening to when I was 3, or, you know? I guess that's what I was going, like, back to your other question. Did we, was there ever, like, a plan to sound like anything, or what are we, you know, influenced by? And I think just growing up and being inspired by all kinds of music, and at least for me, I know that I was like, you know, I'm gonna play a bass. I'm the bass player in the band. I want things to move, and I want them to be dancey. So there's really nothing there was no other motivation other than that. It wasn't there wasn't a specific it wasn't thought out, or I want to write a bass line like you know, this or that. It was just, you know what, I wanted.
Is there no strategy as well? I sometimes wonder, one of the advantages you have in your generation that is interesting is you can imagine different chronologies. So you can imagine, say, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young as if they've been influenced by the Raincoats. You know what I mean? You can put things together in a different way. You can imagine what it would have been like if the Cocteau Twins had come after Cat Power. And I wondered if there's a little, you know, the shuffle era, the internet era, you've got this opportunity to create different imaginary musical narratives, you know.
That's really interesting, yeah. I don't know if I've ever thought about that. That's really interesting, because I'm kind of a little bit OCD about the history of music as well, and so I'd like to know what came before what, you know. Huh?
I said the chicken earlier.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really interesting. I guess there are, at least just now, it's bands like, say, the XX, you know, a lot of younger audiences are listening to their music and totally appreciating it, but they might not know about bands like The Cure or Bauhaus or something, or bands that even those guys listen to, you know. And so it's interesting, maybe that's a good interpretation of that idea, is that you're experiencing it as well, just clean.
Yeah.
Instead of the whatever came before it.
Is that also why you tend to sound tethered to it, but also like you're floating free? It's like you're just breaking away from it. So you were very aware of it, as you say, OCD, you know, want to know, but you're also trying to break free from it. So you don't want to be completely wallowing in the past. You want to move forward. So there's this kind of weird tension that there is of you just wanting to break free.
I think it's harder to just leave that kind of stuff as a backseat notion these days, being just how much music came before what you're trying to create. And I think especially with songwriters today, or any songwriter throughout history, there's always that thing in the back of your mind, like, is this really innovative, or is this really new? Is there a point to doing this? And it's much easier to get caught in that heady creation today, because there's so many wonderful things that have happened before that totally push the envelope, and everything you do now kind of sounds passé.
But I just wondered what it was like, you know, to be at the centre of a weird kind of hype storm, you know, and how much you can just push that to one side, you know.
I think right now it's very difficult for bands that get caught in that. I'm not just saying just us. I've seen it happen to so many bands that just get so overexposed, and people get sick of them, that if they play that game, it will tire pretty soon. If they enjoy it, if that's one of, you know, they love to make music, but one of the other objectives in being a band is to reach some kind of infamy. And so if they, you know, fall into that pool or whatever, like, okay, I'm ready to you take me wherever you want, or the audience will take me wherever they want to, or the press or whatever, that's of your own volition. That's, you know, you have that choice. It's not necessarily that. I think it's also quite easy, if you mean it, to not be involved in that. It's not. There's some things that happen outside of your control, but at the same time, there's, you can be selective as well. And I think the more, like there are right now, we're always getting emails about, oh, doing this interview or whatever, but just knowing, okay, where do we actually want to say something that's significant, as opposed to just being talking heads all the time. Talking Heads, the concert, not the band.
Yeah.
But just being that all the time, just to get exposure, or just to get our face out there, so more people can listen to it. Because luckily now, there's like not only the word of mouth, but the power of the internet and the power of media and stuff. That if people want to hear this band, they have access to it. It's not it's not dug under the sand or whatever. So, in terms of all the other stuff, I feel lucky enough to be, you know, with a record company and with a team and with these girls and, you know. It's
funny how a few years people were saying everything was over and the industry had collapsed, there was no use for record labels. In a funny sort of way, the better, more interesting groups now love the idea of collaborating with a record label, and they love the idea of an unfolding context for their music. So it just isn't the music, but there's the things that come with it, the image, the reputation, the myth, if you like.
Yeah, but it's also very practical as well as being... Yeah. There is like a wonderful image associated with Rough Trade, but at the same time, logistically and everything, they are so respectful and they let things unfold the way that they unfold naturally, whereas just being involved with maybe another record label, there might be a little more of a push towards something else, or like a bit more of a moulding. So in that respect, that's a big part of why we can be selective and we can do the things that we want to do.
And who's your favourite bass players there? Have you got a few favourite bass players?
Jaw Wobble. Love him. I often listen to, at least before I started playing bass, I was really into the melody in the music, and I wouldn't hear the bass. The bass would be the last thing that I heard. I would hear the melody. Yeah. And so when I started playing bass, I played very melodically, and my bass lines were melody. There wasn't the root notes or the backbone, it was the melody. So it was hard for me as far as like, who's your favorite bass player? Didn't really have. What
about you, Stella? What are your favourite drummers?
I really like Greg Saunier, who plays with Deerhoof. Growing up, I was really into Bonham and stuff like that, because that's just the best teacher you can have if you want to play kind of tasteful, aggressive drumming.
Yeah.
And Tony Allen, Fela Kuti's drummer. Levon Helm from the band as well. Yeah, like watching The Last Waltz when I was a kid. That's what I remember, just feeling weak at the knees. I'd never felt that about a drummer before. It was always like, oh, I want to do that, or I was so inspired by it. It was just one of those moments watching him where I felt like no one could ever do what he does, because he's such a musician, you know. I like musical drummers.
Yeah.